The Northcott family's annual summer gathering was a display of success and achievement held at my parents' sprawling estate in Westbrook Hills, a custom-built mansion nestled among manicured gardens with an infinity pool overlooking the valley. It had been 4 years since I last received an invitation, 4 years since I was told not to come back until I had achieved something worth mentioning. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I stood at the wrought iron gates, watching guests arrive in luxury vehicles, doctors, lawyers, executives, all carrying expensive wine bottles and designer gift bags. My cousin Eliza's new convertible purred past me without a glance, followed by my brother Reed's Range Rover. I adjusted my blazer and checked my reflection in my phone screen, wondering if they would even recognize me. The last time they saw me, I was 25. Freshly dropped out of law school after realizing corporate law was my father's dream, not mine. That was also the day my mother, Diana Northcott, had publicly disinvited me from future family gatherings until I could contribute something meaningful to the family reputation. Today, I returned not as Olivia Northcott, the family disappointment, but as CEO of Horizon Innovations, silently one of the fastest-growing sustainable technology companies in the country, valued at $170 million after our latest funding round. They just didn't know it yet. The security guard glanced at his tablet as I approached. "Name, please." "Olivia Northcott," I said, watching his expression change as he scanned the list twice. "I don't see you on the—" His phone buzzed. He answered, listened, then looked up with confusion. "Ms. Northcott, I apologize. You've been added to the list. Please proceed." My assistant Ria's impeccable timing. I'd told her I didn't need special arrangements, but she insisted on making sure the gates would open. "A proper entrance matters," she had said that morning while reviewing my schedule. "Especially when you're about to change the narrative." The long driveway curved through perfectly landscaped gardens, each statue and fountain a testament to old money and older pretensions. I passed the tennis courts where my cousins once mocked my athletic abilities, the gazebo where my achievements were always measured against my brother's, and the pool house where I overheard my father telling his brother, I lacked the Northcott drive for excellence. As I approached the main house, my phone buzzed with a message from Ria. "All systems go. The financials are ready when you need them. Go show them who you've become." The grand doors opened to reveal an army of waitstaff circulating through, the crowd with champagne flutes and canapes. The Northcott summer gathering had always been part family reunion, part networking event, and part status report. Every year, each family member was expected to share their most recent accomplishments, promotions, acquisitions, awards, while my father, Theodore Northcott, beamed with pride from his position at the head of the table. My absence the past. 4 years had barely registered in the family photographs that lined the walls. I scanned the new additions, Reed standing in front of his surgical center, Eliza accepting some legal award, my cousins Blake and Cameron at charity galas. No space had been reserved for whatever I might have accomplished. Well, well, look who decided to grace us with her presence. I turned to find my brother Reed, surgical precision in his tailored suit, a glass of scotch already in hand. His expression was a practiced mix of surprise and condescension. "Hello, Reed." I accepted a champagne flute from a passing server, using the moment to steady myself. "Honestly didn't expect to see you here. What finally qualified as successful enough for the Northcott standards? Found a husband with the right connections?" His laugh suggested he thought this the most likely explanation for my return. I sipped my champagne slowly. "Just thought it was time to catch up with the family." "Right." He eyed my blazer, which I knew he was trying to identify by designer. "Well, Mom and Dad will certainly be surprised. They've just finished telling the Harringtons about my new surgical wing." Of course they had. Reed's accomplishments had always been the family's favorite conversation starter. How lovely. I'm sure it's exactly what they expected of you. I kept my voice neutral, though I knew the subtle barb would register. Reed's eyes narrowed slightly. Some of us understand family legacy and responsibility, Liv. And some of us find different paths. How is Caroline? I asked, knowing his recent divorce was a sore spot. Busy spending my money, he muttered, his perfect composure cracking just slightly. If you'll excuse me, I should greet the Harringtons. I watched him retreat, remembering how he'd stood silently by during my final family dinner 4 years ago, offering no defense when our parents suggested I take an extended absence from family functions until I had sorted out my priorities. Across the room, my mother held court among her social circle, her perfectly highlighted hair catching the light, her emerald necklace, a gift from my father for their 30th anniversary, gleaming against her silk blouse. She hadn't seen me yet, but I could already imagine her reaction. The momentary shock, the quick recovery, the careful assessment of whether my appearance would elevate or diminish the family image. I made my way through the crowd, accepting curious glances from family friends who clearly hadn't expected to see me. A few distant relatives offered polite but confused greetings. Olivia, is that you? What are you doing these days? Each question delivered with the same subtext. Have you finally become something worth acknowledging? Preparing and narrating. This story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Olivia. My cousin Eliza intercepted me, champagne in one hand, phone in the other. Always connected, always calculating. Didn't know you were coming. What's the special occasion? Just missed the family charm, I replied with a smile that matched her own in insincerity. Her eyes scanned me like a document in need of reviewing. Well, you look decent. Finally found a career that stuck? 4 years ago, Eliza had been particularly vocal about my inability to commit when I left law school. She'd called it typical Olivia behavior and suggested I would always be searching for the easy way out. I found my path, I said simply. Retail? Hospitality? She raised a perfectly groomed eyebrow. Something entry-level with potential, I imagine. Before I could respond, a chime rang through the space. Dinner was about to be served. The crowd began moving toward the grand dining room, where the annual family showcase would commence. My stomach tightened. This was where it had happened last time, the public dressing down, the suggestion that I remove myself from family gatherings until I had earned my place at the table. My father's exact words. "Everyone, please find your assigned seats," called my mother's assistant, a new face since my last visit. I scanned the place cards, wondering if they'd even set a place for me. But there it was, at the far end of the table, practically in another zip code from my parents. An afterthought edition, likely added after my unexpected arrival. As I took my seat, I felt my phone buzz. Another message from Rhea. Northcott Industries' quarterly report just published. Your parents' company is showing a 22% decrease year over year. Multiple contracts lost. Should I send the complete breakdown? I texted back. Not yet. Timing matters. Around me, relatives settled into their chairs. My Uncle Bernard with his third wife, cousins who had barely acknowledged me, family friends who assessed everyone by net worth and connections, and at the head of the table, my father, Theodore Northcott, CEO of Northcott Industries, a once innovative engineering firm that had been resting on its reputation for the past decade. My mother took her place beside him, her gaze finally finding me at the distant end of the table. I watched the micro-expressions cross her face, surprise, confusion, rapid calculation of how to handle this unexpected variable in her perfectly orchestrated evening. My father followed her gaze, his expression hardening when he saw me. He leaned over to whisper something to her, and she nodded slightly before plastering on her hostess' smile. "Welcome, everyone, to our annual summer gathering," she announced, voice carrying effortlessly through the space. "As always, we're delighted to celebrate the achievements and milestones of the Northcott family. We have much to be proud of this year." The first course arrived, a delicate arrangement of seasonal vegetables and imported cheese. I remembered how these meals would progress, each course accompanied by announcements of family achievements, building toward my father's traditional closing remarks about legacy and excellence. "Reed's new surgical center has been recognized in National Health Quarterly," my mother began, raising her glass toward my brother, the youngest surgeon to establish such a facility in the state. Appreciative murmurs circled the table. Reed nodded modestly, though his eyes gleamed with satisfaction. "And Eliza has been named partner at Harrington, Walsh and Associates," my father added, "the fastest partner track in the firm's history." More approving noises, more raised glasses. Eliza accepted the recognition with practiced humility. The pattern continued through the second course. Cousin Blake's architectural award, Cousin Cameron's corporate acquisition, Uncle Bernard's new position on some prestigious board. Each achievement documented and celebrated, each success another brick in the Northcott legacy wall. I ate silently, watching the performance I'd grown up with, now seeing it from an outsider's perspective. The desperate need for validation, the carefully curated images, the way every accomplishment was measured against family expectations rather than personal fulfillment. My phone vibrated again. Rhea was persistent. "Northcott Industries lost the Westlake development contract last month. Their stock dropped 17% on the news. Your father hasn't disclosed this to shareholders yet." As the main course arrived, a perfectly cooked beef tenderloin that I knew had been sourced from some exclusive farm, my father tapped his glass. "While we celebrate our family's continued excellence," he began, pointedly avoiding looking in my direction, "Northcott Industries has secured several promising contracts that will ensure our position in the market for years to come." I felt a smile tugging at my lips. Either he was lying to his family, or he was lying to his shareholders. Either way, I knew the truth. "Diana and I are particularly proud of how the next generation continues to uphold the Northcott standards of achievement," he continued. "It's gratifying to see our values of excellence, determination, and strategic thinking carried forward." The meal continued with more self-congratulation, more careful positioning of the family narrative. I remained silent, waiting. Timing, as Rhea often reminded me, was everything. As dessert was served, some elaborate concoction of chocolate and gold leaf, my mother finally acknowledged my presence. "Olivia," she called down the table, her voice carrying a hint of challenge. "We're all curious what brings you back after so long. Do you have something to share with the family?" All eyes turned to me. This was the moment, the traditional Northcott Achievement Report. 4 years ago, I had nothing to report and was, quietly but firmly, suggested to exclude myself from future gatherings until I did. "Actually, I do," I said, my voice calm despite the thundering of my heart. "But perhaps we should wait until after dessert for business matters." My father frowned. "Business matters? Last we heard, you were struggling to find direction after abandoning law school. Has something changed?" The condescension in his voice was familiar, the tone he'd used when I told him I was leaving law school, when I explained that corporate law wasn't my passion, when I suggested that success might look different than the Northcott template. "Quite a bit has changed, Father." I took a sip of water, gathering myself. "But please don't let me interrupt the celebrations." My mother's eyes narrowed. She never liked unscripted moments at her events. "No need to be mysterious, Olivia. If you've finally found stable employment, we'd all love to hear about it." The table fell silent. Everyone waiting for the family disappointment to offer some meager achievement that would inevitably fall short of Northcott standards. Very well. I placed my napkin beside my plate and stood. For the past 4 years, I've been building a company called Horizon Innovations. We specialize in sustainable engineering solutions for urban development projects. My father's expression shifted slightly. Engineering was the family business, after all. How nice, my mother said dismissively. A small consultancy, is it? Not exactly. I held her gaze. We currently employ 170 people across 3 offices. Our last valuation put us at $170 million after our Series B funding round closed last month. The silence that followed was different than before, heavier, charged with disbelief. That's not possible, Reed said finally. We would have heard. Would you? I asked. The same way you've heard about Northcott Industries losing the Westlake contract. Or the 22% revenue decrease year over year. Or the 3 senior executives who left last quarter. My father's face darkened. What are you talking about? Publicly available information for those who bother to look. I kept my voice even. But perhaps that's a conversation for another time. You expect us to believe you've built a multi-million-dollar company completely under the radar? Eliza challenged. I don't particularly care what you believe, I replied. The facts speak for themselves. My phone buzzed again. I glanced down to see another message from Rhea. Northcott Industries CFO just called. They want to schedule a meeting about the Henderson project. Should I tell them who they'd really be meeting with? And there it was. The perfect moment. Actually, I continued, looking back at my family's confused faces, Horizon Innovations has recently been approached about a major development contract, the Henderson Urban Renewal Project. My father's expression froze. The Henderson project was exactly the kind of contract Northcott Industries would typically pursue, exactly the kind of project they desperately needed after losing Westlake. The Henderson project hasn't been awarded yet, he said carefully. The RFP process is still ongoing. Is it? I tilted my head slightly. That's interesting because my assistant just informed me that Northcott Industries' CFO is trying to schedule a meeting with Horizon's CEO about that very project. The color drained from my father's face. Around the table, relatives exchanged confused glances. My mother's perfectly composed expression cracked just slightly. What exactly? Are you saying, Olivia? She asked, voice taut. I'm saying that Horizon Innovations has been awarded the primary contract for the Henderson Urban Renewal Project, and Northcott Industries is apparently interested in subcontracting portions of the work. My father pushed back from the table. This is absurd. If this were true, I would know about it. Would you? I picked up my phone, tapped a few times, and projected an email onto the dining room wall using the estate's integrated system. An email from Henderson Development Group to Horizon Innovations, confirming the award of the primary contract. This is impossible, my father muttered, pulling out his own phone, presumably to check with his executive team. 4 years ago, I said, addressing the entire table now. I was told I didn't belong at this table because I hadn't earned my place, because I hadn't lived up to the Northcott standard of success, because I walked away from a path that wasn't right for me to find one that was. My mother's lips pressed into a thin line. Olivia, this isn't the appropriate. 4 years, I continued. 4 years of missed holidays. 4 years of being the unmentionable family member. 4 years of building something from nothing while you all assumed I was failing. If you've come here for some kind of revenge, Reed began. Revenge? I laughed softly. No, Reed. I came here because Horizon Innovations is considering subcontractors for portions of the Henderson project, and despite everything, I thought family deserved the first opportunity. My father looked up from his phone, his expression unreadable. You're serious? Completely. I gathered my things and stood. My assistant will be in touch with your team tomorrow to schedule a proper meeting. We can discuss the details then, if you're interested. Wait, my mother said, her voice lacking its usual authority. You're leaving? But we haven't even finished. I think I've made my contribution to the family achievement showcase, Mother. I glanced around the table at the stunned faces of relatives who had written me off years ago. Thank you for the dinner. It was exactly as I remembered. As I walked toward the door, my cousin Cameron called after me. Olivia, you can't just drop something like this and leave. I paused at the threshold. Actually, I can. That's the thing about success on your own terms. You get to define the rules of engagement. Outside, the warm summer evening enveloped me. I took a deep breath, feeling lighter than I had in years. My phone rang, Rhea checking in. How did it go? She asked. Exactly as expected, I replied, walking down the path toward the gate. Have you ever seen a room full of people realize they've been wrong about someone all at once? It's quite something. So they finally saw what I've been seeing for 4 years, Rhea said. I could hear the smile in her voice. Are we really going to consider Northcott Industries for the subcontract? I paused by the fountain where, as a teenager, I'd once been told I lacked the killer instinct necessary for real success. Yes, I said finally, but they'll have to earn it just like anyone else. No family discounts, no shortcuts. You're a better person than I would be in your position, Rhea observed. I watched the lights of the mansion recede behind me. It's not about being better, it's about being different. They define success by titles, money, and status. I define it by building something meaningful, something that matters. As I reached my car, I heard footsteps on the gravel behind me. I turned to find my father, slightly out of breath from hurrying after me. Olivia, he said, his voice strangely uncertain. We should talk. We will, I replied. Tomorrow, in my office. 10 a.m. Your office? He seemed thrown by the concept. Yes, the Horizon Innovations headquarters downtown, 22nd floor. I opened my car door. Bring your proposal for the Henderson subcontract. And maybe wear something other than a tie. We're a bit more relaxed about the dress code. I drove away from the estate, leaving my father standing in the driveway, the mighty Theodore Northcott finally seeing me not as his disappointing daughter, but as someone he would need to negotiate with. As I turned onto the main road, my phone buzzed with messages from relatives suddenly remembering my existence, suddenly curious about my company, suddenly eager to reconnect. I ignored them all. Tomorrow would be soon enough to begin the next chapter. The chapter where the family that had banned me from their table for being unsuccessful would sit at mine instead, hoping for a place at the feast I had prepared without them. The next morning, I arrived at Horizon Innovations an hour early. Our headquarters occupied the top 3 floors of a sleek glass building downtown, a far cry from the converted warehouse space where we'd started 4 years ago with just 6 employees and more determination than funding. I paused in the lobby, taking in the living wall of plants that greeted visitors, the sustainable materials that composed every surface, the subtle integration of technology that made the space both welcoming and impressive. Every detail reflected our company values: innovation, sustainability, purposeful design. Nothing ostentatious, nothing wasteful, nothing for show. The antithesis of the Northcott approach to architecture and life. Morning, Ms. Northcott, called Marco, our head of security. You're in early today. Big meeting, I replied with a smile. How's Delia doing with college applications? Marco beamed. She's finalizing her essay this weekend. That scholarship program your foundation started has been a game changer, first in our family to have a shot at university. This was the kind of success that mattered to me. Creating opportunities, lifting people up, making a tangible difference. the kind of success my family had never understood or valued. As I rode the elevator to the 22nd floor, I thought about how different this building was from Northcott Industries' imposing stone headquarters, a structure my father had once described as conveying proper gravity and tradition. Our space was filled with natural light, open collaborative areas, and flexible workstations. We'd prioritized employee wellness, environmental impact, and community integration in every design decision. The elevator doors opened directly into our main workspace. I'd insisted on no executive floor segregation when we designed the office. Instead, my glass-walled office sat in the center of the open plan, accessible to everyone. Transparency wasn't just a buzzword at Horizon, it was built into our physical space. Ria was already at her desk outside my office, 2 cups of coffee in hand. "You look surprisingly well-rested for someone who just detonated a family nuclear bomb," she observed, handing me the stronger of the 2 cups. "Turns out the truth is a good sleeping aid," I replied, taking the coffee gratefully. "Any word from Northcott Industries?" "Their executive assistant called twice this morning to confirm the meeting. Apparently your father isn't used to coming. 2 others' offices." Ria's smile was just short of wicked. "I explained that your schedule is quite full and accommodations couldn't be made." I laughed. "You didn't." "I absolutely did. Very professionally, of course." She followed me into my office. "Also, I've prepared the Henderson contract materials, background on Northcott Industries' current financial situation, and a detailed analysis of which portions of the project they might reasonably handle given their capacity constraints." This was why Ria had risen from administrative assistant to chief of staff in 3 years. While my family had been dismissing me as a failure, I'd been building a team of brilliant people who valued results over reputation. "Perfect," I said, settling at my desk. "And the team?" "Project leads will join at 10:30 after your initial conversation. Elena has the sustainability metrics ready. Javier prepared the community impact assessment, and Mackenzie finalized the financial projections." I nodded, feeling that familiar surge of pride in our team. People who had joined Horizon because they believed in our mission, not because of family legacy or obligation. "One more thing," Ria added, pulling up something on her tablet. "You might want to see this before your father arrives." She handed me the tablet, showing a business news site with the headline, "Northcott Industries stock falls 8% on rumors of lost Henderson contract." "Published 30 minutes ago," Ria noted. I scanned the article quickly. The market was reacting to whispers that Northcott had lost the Henderson bid to a younger, more innovative competitor. The piece speculated about what this meant for the once dominant engineering firm's future. "Did we leak this?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Of course not," Ria replied. "But the Henderson Development Group might have updated their investor relations page late last night with a very vague announcement about awarding the primary contract to a forward-thinking sustainable engineering partner. No names mentioned, but people connect dots quickly." I handed the tablet back to her. "My father is going to be in quite a mood." "I'd expect nothing less," Ria said. "Would you like me to stay in the meeting as a buffer?" I considered this. Having Ria there would certainly help manage the inevitable tension, but this was a conversation I needed to have directly. "No, but stay close, and make sure the project team is thoroughly prepped before they join us. This isn't about family drama. It's about determining if Northcott Industries can deliver what the Henderson project needs." Ria nodded and left to prepare the team while I reviewed the contract materials one last time. The Henderson Urban Renewal Project was exactly the kind of work Horizon had been founded to pursue. A massive redevelopment initiative focused on transforming an abandoned industrial area into a sustainable mixed-use district. Solar integration, water reclamation, community gardens, affordable housing, and commercial space designed to foster local businesses. We'd won the primary contract based on our innovative approach to community integration and environmental impact. Northcott Industries, with their traditional engineering focus, would never have led with those elements, which is precisely why they hadn't won the bid. At precisely 9:58, Ria's voice came through the intercom. "Mr. Northcott and Mr. Fallows from Northcott Industries have arrived." My father and his CFO. Interesting that he hadn't brought their chief engineer or sustainability director, if they even had one. His approach was still financial first, technical considerations second. "Send them in," I replied, standing to greet them. My father entered first, his tailored suit and commanding presence so familiar it almost made me feel like a child again. Almost. Behind him followed James Fallows, the CFO who had joined Northcott Industries shortly before I left for college. Both men carried leather portfolios and expressions of carefully controlled discomfort at finding themselves in this position. "Olivia," my father said, extending his hand formally as if we were meeting at an industry conference rather than as father and daughter. "Thank you for making time this morning." I shook his hand, noting how strange it felt. This professional distance layered over personal history. "Thank you for coming. Please have a seat." They settled into the chairs across from my desk. My father glanced around my office, taking in the awards on the walls, the sustainable design elements, the view of the city through the floor-to-ceiling windows. "Impressive space," he acknowledged reluctantly. "How long have you been here?" "We moved in last year after outgrowing our previous office," I replied. "Would either of you like coffee?" Small talk completed, my father shifted directly to business mode. "About the Henderson project." "Yes," I cut in smoothly. "A significant opportunity. $240 million in total development costs, with approximately $80 million allocated to the engineering and implementation phases, which is where Horizon will be taking the lead." Fallows coughed slightly, clearly surprised by the scale. My father's expression remained neutral, though I could see the calculations happening behind his eyes. "The question," I continued, "is whether there's a role for Northcott Industries as a subcontractor on specific elements. That's what we're here to discuss today." "Before we get into that," my father said, his voice taking on the authoritative tone he'd used in countless board meetings, "I think we should address the rather dramatic way this information came to light. Of course, he would try to make this about my behavior rather than Northcott's opportunity. Some patterns never changed. If you're referring to my attendance at the family dinner, it was long overdue," I said calmly. "As for the Henderson contract, that information would have reached you through official channels today regardless. The timing was coincidental, though I admit the revelation was perhaps more theatrical than a standard business notification." Fallows shifted uncomfortably in his chair. My father's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. 4 years, Olivia," he said, his voice lower. 4 years of silence, building this company without a word to your family. Why? This wasn't the business meeting I'd prepared for, but perhaps it was the conversation we needed to have first. "I believe the terms were made quite clear at our last family dinner," I replied. "I wasn't welcome until I had achieved something worth mentioning. Those were your words, if I recall correctly." "That was never meant to be a complete severance," he argued, though his eyes flickered with something that might have been regret. "Your mother and I expected you would find your path and return to the family fold. Under your definition of success," I added. "Which is exactly why I didn't. I needed to build something on my own terms, without the Northcott name opening doors or family expectations influencing my decisions." Fallows cleared his throat. "Perhaps I should step outside while you—" "That won't be necessary," I said. "This intersection of personal and professional is relevant to our discussion. Northcott Industries is interested in subcontracting on the Henderson project, which means you need to understand exactly who you'd be partnering with." My father leaned forward slightly. "And who would that be exactly?" A company founded on principles that directly challenge many of Northcott Industries' traditional approaches, I said plainly. We prioritize sustainability over expedience, community integration over rapid deployment, and long-term impact over immediate profit margins. I opened a folder on my desk and slid 3 documents across to them. Our core values, our project methodology, and our specific approach to the Henderson development. If these align with Northcott Industries' current direction, we can discuss potential areas for collaboration. If not, there are other subcontractors we can consider. My father took the documents, his expression unreadable. He had always been skilled at concealing his thoughts in business settings, a trait I'd observed and eventually adopted, though I applied it differently. You've certainly been thorough, he noted, scanning the materials. I learned the importance of preparation. From you, I acknowledged. It was true. For all our differences, my father's meticulous approach to business planning had shaped my own. Fallows was reviewing the financial projections with increasing interest. These sustainability metrics, they actually improve the long-term ROI considerably. That's the point, I said. Environmental responsibility isn't just ethically sound. It's financially advantageous when you extend your projection timeline beyond the standard 3-year window. My father looked up from the documents. The Northcott Industries I built has always focused on solid engineering fundamentals, tried, and tested approaches that deliver consistent results. Which worked perfectly for the last 30 years, I agreed. But the market has evolved. Clients like Henderson Development Group are prioritizing different values now. Values you anticipated, he observed, and I detected the faintest note of reluctant pride in his voice. Values I believed in, I corrected. The business case followed the principles, not the other way around. My father set the documents down and studied me with new eyes, not as his wayward daughter, but as a business leader who had identified a market shift before he had. Why offer Northcott Industries a subcontracting opportunity at all? He asked finally. After everything that happened, you could easily have excluded us entirely. It was a fair question, one I'd asked myself, repeatedly since making the decision. 3 reasons, I replied. First, despite our differences in approach, Northcott Industries still has specific technical expertise that could benefit certain aspects of the project. Second, a partnership like this could potentially help both companies evolve in productive ways. And third, I paused, meeting his gaze directly. I believe in separating personal history from business decisions. Another principle I learned from you, even if we apply it differently. Something shifted in my father's expression, a complex mixture of surprise, reassessment, and something that might have been respect. Your mother was quite upset after you left last night, he said unexpectedly. I kept my expression neutral. I imagine the entire family was unprepared for the revelation. She said, he hesitated, which was unusual for Theodore Northcott. She said perhaps we had been too rigid in our definitions of success. This was as close to an acknowledgement of error as I had ever heard from either of my parents. 4 years is a long time to reconsider definitions, I observed. Before he could respond, there was a soft knock at the door, and Rhea entered. Sorry to interrupt, but the project team is ready whenever you'd like them to join, she said. Perfect timing, as always. The personal conversation had reached its natural conclusion. Now we could return to business. Please send them in, I said. Mr. Northcott and Mr. Fallows, I'd like you to meet our Henderson project leadership team. The door opened wider, and 5 people entered. Elena, our sustainability director, Javier, head of community integration, Mackenzie, financial strategist, Damon, chief engineer, and Lena, our construction coordination lead. A diverse group, in every sense, each bringing specific expertise and perspective to the project. I made the introductions, noting how my father assessed each team member with the shrewd evaluation he'd always applied to potential business associates. But there was something new in his observation, a recognition that this team reflected a different approach to organizational structure than Northcott Industries' traditional hierarchy. Before we dive into the technical details, I said as everyone settled around the conference table in my office, I want to clarify that this meeting is exploratory. We're evaluating whether there's potential for collaboration that serves the Henderson Project's goals. This isn't a guaranteed subcontract. Elena began the presentation, outlining the sustainability requirements that formed the backbone of our proposal. As she explained our integrated approach to energy systems, water management, and material selection, I watched my father's expression shift from skeptical to thoughtful. These specifications exceed current regulations by a considerable margin, he noted. They align with where regulations will be in 5 years, Elena replied confidently. We design for the future, not just current compliance. Javier followed with our community integration model, how the development would create jobs, support local businesses, and provide affordable housing options. We've already engaged with neighborhood associations and conducted extensive surveys to ensure the development serves existing community needs rather than displacing residents. This was the aspect of our approach most foreign to Northcott Industries' traditional methods. My father had always focused on the structures themselves, not the human ecosystem they existed within. As the presentation continued, I observed the dynamic between my father and the team. He asked incisive questions, challenging assumptions, probing for weaknesses, exactly as he would in any business meeting. And my team responded with the confidence of experts who knew their fields intimately, unintimidated by Theodore Northcott's reputation. Finally, Mackenzie presented the financial model, demonstrating how our integrated approach would deliver both environmental and fiscal sustainability. The initial investment is higher than conventional methods, she acknowledged, addressing the concern I knew would be foremost in Fallow's mind. But the operational savings and increased property values create a significantly stronger long-term return profile. When the presentation concluded, there was a moment of silence as my father and Fallows absorbed the comprehensive vision we'd laid out. Impressive, my father said finally. Different from our typical approach, but impressively thorough. Coming from Theodore Northcott, this was high praise indeed. Thank you for your time, I told the team. Mr. Northcott and Mr. Fallows might have some additional questions to consider. We can reconvene later if needed. After the team filed out, I turned back to my father and his CFO. So, do you see potential for Northcott Industries to contribute meaningfully to this approach? Fallows looked to my father, clearly waiting for his lead. My father sat back in his chair, studying me with an expression I couldn't quite decipher. It would require significant adaptation on our part, he said slowly. Our current methods don't align perfectly with your sustainability metrics or community integration model. Change is difficult, I acknowledged, but sometimes necessary for survival. The subtext was clear to all of us. Northcott Industries was losing market share precisely because they had resisted evolving with changing client priorities. I'd like to take these materials back to our team for review, my father said. There may be specific components where we could add value without compromising your overall vision. It was a more measured response than I had expected, an acknowledgement that adaptation might be possible rather than an immediate rejection of our approach as impractical or unnecessary. Of course, I agreed. We'll need your preliminary proposal by next Friday if you're interested in pursuing this opportunity. The overall project timeline is aggressive. My father nodded, gathering the materials. As he and Fallows prepared to leave, he paused, seeming to struggle with something. Your mother and I would like you to come to dinner, he said finally. Not a family gathering, just us. There are conversations that seem overdue. The invitation caught me off guard. I had prepared for business negotiations, not personal reconciliation. "I'll check my schedule," I replied, maintaining professional distance. "Rhea can coordinate with your assistant." He nodded, accepting the boundary I'd established. "One more question, if I may. Horizon Innovations. Why that name?" It was the first personal curiosity he'd expressed about my company. "Because a horizon represents possibility," I said simply. "The place where vision meets reality. It seemed fitting for what we were trying to build." Something like understanding flickered across his face. "I see. Thank you for your time today, Olivia. This has been educational." After they left, Rhea returned to my office. "Well, how did the great Theodore Northcott take being on the other side of the negotiating table?" "Better than expected," I admitted, though whether that translates to actual business adaptation remains to be seen. "And the dinner invitation?" I sighed, looking out at the city skyline. "That's more complicated. 4 years of silence isn't easily bridged over a single meal." "True," Rhea acknowledged. "But 4 years of building something remarkable gives you the stronger position in that conversation. You're not the daughter seeking approval anymore. You're an industry leader they need to understand." She was right. The dynamics had fundamentally changed. I wasn't returning to the family fold as the prodigal daughter. I was potentially bringing my parents into my world as equals. "Set it up for next week," I decided. "After their proposal deadline, let's keep the business and personal aspects clearly separated." As Rhea left to arrange the dinner, I turned back to my desk and the framed photograph I kept there, the only personal item in my otherwise minimalist office. It showed our original team of 6 standing in that first warehouse space, exhausted but exhilarated after securing our first major contract. That moment, not the family dinners, not the prestigious schools, not the Northcott name, had been the foundation of my true success. The moment when I stopped trying to earn a place at someone else's table and started building my own. My phone buzzed with a message from Elena. "Team's buzzing about the Northcott meeting? Think they'll adapt enough to work with us?" I smiled. As I typed my response, people can surprise you when they realize the world has changed without them. Sometimes even the most rigid traditions bend when faced with the choice between evolution and irrelevance. Whether that applied to Northcott Industries or to my relationship with my family remained to be seen. But for the first time in 4 years, both possibilities seemed worth exploring. The following week passed in a blur of meetings, project developments, and speculation about Northcott Industries' response to our Henderson proposal. I deliberately immersed myself in work, reviewing designs for a vertical garden system in our Boston project, finalizing community feedback sessions for the Minneapolis redevelopment, and mentoring our newest cohort of engineering graduates, Bright. Minds we'd recruited from universities that prioritized sustainable design rather than just prestigious names. "You're distracting yourself," Rhea observed on Thursday afternoon, finding me in our materials lab where I was examining prototypes of a new permeable concrete our R&D team had developed. "I'm doing my job," I countered, though we both knew she was right. "Tomorrow is both the proposal deadline and your dinner with your parents," she reminded me unnecessarily. "Want to talk about either?" I set down the concrete sample. "Has Northcott Industries submitted anything yet?" "Nothing formal, but their team has been asking detailed questions about our sustainability metrics. Their chief engineer, someone named Winters, requested a call with Elena yesterday to clarify some technical specifications. This was unexpected. Lucas Winters was one of the most traditional engineers at Northcott Industries, brilliant but notoriously resistant to newer methodologies. If my father had put him on this project, it suggested they were taking the opportunity seriously. "And the dinner?" Rhea pressed when I didn't respond. "Is just dinner," I said firmly, though my stomach tightened at the thought. "A business formality." Rhea gave me a look that clearly said she didn't believe me. You've faced down venture, capitalists, city planning boards, and environmental regulators without breaking a sweat. But dinner with your parents has you hiding in the materials lab. I'm not hiding, I objected, though perhaps I was. I'm giving our R&D team the attention they deserve. Of course, she agreed too readily. By the way, your brother called. Again. Reed had been trying to reach me since the family dinner. Each call strategically ignored, each voicemail deleted unheard. Whatever reconciliation or confrontation he sought would have to wait until I was ready, if I ever would be. Your mother also sent over the menu options for tomorrow, Rhea continued, scrolling through her tablet. Apparently the chef at Luca's needs to know if you still have that shellfish sensitivity, or if you've outgrown it like you did your other childish phases. I couldn't help but laugh at Rhea's perfect imitation of my mother's disapproving tone. Tell her the shellfish allergy remains stubbornly present, despite my best efforts to mature beyond anaphylaxis. Already did, minus the sarcasm. Rhea handed me the tablet. But there's something else you should see. It just came through from Henderson Development Group. I took the tablet, scanning the email quickly. Henderson was requesting an emergency meeting tomorrow morning. They had concerns about potential delays in permitting that could impact our timeline. This is strange timing, I murmured. The preliminary permits were moving smoothly last week. That's what I thought, Rhea agreed. I reached out to our contact in the city planning office. Apparently, someone has raised questions about the, environmental impact study, specifically challenging our water reclamation system design. A cold feeling settled in my stomach. Who raised the concerns? Rhea's expression confirmed my suspicion before she spoke. A firm representing Northcott Industries. The betrayal was so predictable I should have anticipated it. Even as they pretended to consider partnership, they were working to undermine our position with the client. Set up the meeting with Henderson. For 8 a.m., I said, my voice hardening. And cancel dinner with my parents. Some patterns never change. Rhea nodded, but hesitated before leaving. Are you sure canceling is the right move? Might be better to confront this directly. What's to confront? It's classic Theodore Northcott strategy. Delay your competitor while positioning yourself as the solution to the very problem you created. I shook my head, disappointment and anger mingling. I was a fool to think they might actually consider honest collaboration. Maybe, Rhea acknowledged. Or maybe there's more to the story. Either way, running from the conversation won't resolve anything. She was right, as usual. My instinct to withdraw, to protect myself from further disappointment, was exactly the pattern I needed to break if I wanted to be different from my family. Keep the dinner, I decided. But move the Henderson meeting to 7 a.m. so I have time to prepare for both battles. That night, I stayed late at the office reviewing every detail of our water reclamation system with Elena and our engineering team. The design was sound, innovative but thoroughly tested, which meant the concerns raised were almost certainly tactical rather than substantive. They're trying to create doubt, Elena confirmed, frustration evident in her voice. The system exceeds every regulatory requirement. We've even built in redundancies that go beyond what the code demands. Then we'll be prepared to demonstrate that tomorrow, I assured her. Bring the simulation data, the test results from the Phoenix project, and the third-party certification. We'll leave Henderson with no room for doubt. After everyone left, I remained at my desk, staring at the city lights spreading below. 4 years ago, when I'd first conceived of Horizon Innovations, I'd imagined moments like this, proving the viability of sustainable design against traditional opposition. I just hadn't expected that opposition to come from my own family. My phone vibrated with a text from an unfamiliar number. This is Eliza. We need to talk before your dinner tomorrow. Important. Call me. My cousin reaching out was unexpected. Eliza and I had never been close. Our relationship defined more by competition than connection. What could she possibly have to say that would matter now? Against my better judgment, I called. Finally, she answered on the first ring. I wasn't sure you'd call back. I almost didn't, I admitted. What's so important, Eliza? It's about the Henderson project. Her voice was uncharacteristically hesitant. And Uncle Theodore's approach to it. My grip tightened on the phone. You mean Northcott Industries' attempt to undermine our contract by raising spurious concerns about our water system? So you know, she sighed. Look, I'm not supposed to be telling you this, but I think it's wrong. Your father hired my firm to find regulatory angles to delay the project. This was surprising, not the tactic, but Eliza's decision to inform me. Why are you telling me this? Aren't you violating client confidentiality? Technically, no. I refuse the case. Another surprise. I told the partners I had a conflict of interest, which is true, just not in the way they think. What conflict? I asked, genuinely confused. I've been researching sustainable urban development for the past 2 years, she said. Working. Pro bono with community housing advocates. Your approach with Henderson, it's exactly what these neighborhoods need. Undermining it for competitive advantage is ethically problematic. I sat back in my chair, genuinely stunned. Eliza Northcott, the family's perfect corporate lawyer, had developed a social conscience? That's unexpected, I managed. Don't sound so shocked, she said, a hint of the old defensive Eliza returning. People can evolve, you know, even Northcotts. Apparently some can, I agreed, though my father seems committed to his traditional playbook. Yes and no. She hesitated. There's more going on than you know. The board is pushing for modernization. Your success with Horizon has become... Let's just say it's raised uncomfortable questions about Northcott Industries' future viability. This was valuable intelligence, the kind that could help me prepare for tomorrow's confrontations. Why? Are you really telling me this, Eliza? We've never exactly been allies. Her response was surprisingly candid. Because what you've built matters, and because watching you at that family dinner made me realize how toxic our family's definition of success has been. You walked away and created something meaningful. The rest of us just kept chasing approval. The admission hung between us, an unexpected moment of genuine connection. Thank you, I said finally, for the information and the perspective. Don't thank me. Yet, she replied. Uncle Theodore is coming to dinner tomorrow with an agenda, and it's not just about Henderson. Be prepared. After ending the call, I sat in the darkened office, processing this unexpected development. Eliza's warning suggested tomorrow would be even more complicated than I'd anticipated. Whatever my father was planning, I needed to be ready. I opened my laptop and began typing. Not project notes or meeting preparation, but something more personal. The story of Horizon Innovations, from concept to current reality. The challenges, the breakthroughs, the principles that had guided every decision. Not a formal business history, but a record of transformation. My transformation from rejected daughter to industry innovator. Sometimes the best preparation for the future is to fully understand your past. The next morning dawned clear and bright, symbolic weather for what promised to be a day of reckoning. I arrived at the office at 6:30, giving myself time to center before the Henderson meeting. Our conference room was prepared with detailed displays of the water reclamation system design, including interactive models showing its functionality and safety protocols. Elena and the engineering team had even created a miniature working prototype overnight, a physical demonstration of our commitment to transparency and excellence. The Henderson representatives are here, Ria announced, precisely at 7. And they've brought someone unexpected. Who? I asked, straightening my jacket. Lucas Winters, Northcott Industries chief engineer. So they were escalating the situation, bringing their technical expert to raise doubts directly in front of the client rather than working through regulatory channels. Perfect, I said with more confidence than I felt. Let's address this head on. As the meeting began, I observed the dynamics carefully. Henderson's project director, Zhang, seemed uncomfortable, caught between competing expert opinions. Winters sat rigidly in his chair, a stack of technical documents before him, while our team arranged their presentation materials with calm efficiency. Thank you all for coming on such short notice, I began. I understand there are concerns about our water reclamation system that require immediate clarification. Zhang nodded. We've received some technical questions that could potentially impact permitting. Given the project timeline, we need absolute certainty that there won't be regulatory delays. Of course, I agreed, which is why we've prepared a comprehensive demonstration of the system's design, safety protocols, and compliance standards. But first, I'd like to address the source of these concerns directly. I turned to Winters. Mr. Winters, perhaps you could articulate your specific technical objections so we can address them systematically. It was a strategic move, forcing him to present his critique before we revealed our evidence, preventing him from adapting his arguments to our presentation. Winters cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable with being put on the spot. Ms. Northcott, our concerns are purely technical. The integrated water reclamation system you've proposed uses methodology that hasn't been fully tested at this scale. The potential for contamination is mitigated by triple redundant filtration systems, real-time monitoring, and automatic shutdown protocols. Elena cut in smoothly, activating the interactive model. As demonstrated in our Phoenix implementation, which has been operational for 18 months with perfect compliance records. For the next 40 minutes, our team systematically dismantled every technical objection Winters raised. Each concern was met with data, testing results, and practical examples from existing installations. The miniature prototype demonstrated the system's functionality in real time, with sensors displaying water quality metrics that exceeded regulatory standards. As the presentation concluded, Zhang's expression had transformed from concern to relief tinged with admiration. This is considerably more thorough than we expected. The system appears not just compliant, but genuinely innovative. Winters sat silent, his technical objections exhausted. I almost felt sorry for him. He was merely executing my father's strategy, likely uncomfortable with the role of saboteur. Mr. Winters, I said, deliberately keeping my tone professional, rather than triumphant, your technical expertise is well respected in the industry. Having addressed these concerns comprehensively, would you agree that our system meets all necessary safety and compliance standards? It was a calculated move, offering him a professional courtesy, while putting him in a position where denying the evidence would damage his own credibility. He hesitated, clearly struggling between his assignment and his engineering integrity. Finally, he nodded stiffly. The redundancy protocols are impressive, more comprehensive than standard practice. Thank you for your candor, I said, genuinely appreciating his professional honesty, despite the circumstances. Mr. Zhang, does this address Henderson Development's concerns adequately? Zhang was already gathering his materials. More than adequately. I'll inform the board that the technical questions have been resolved conclusively. We see no reason for permitting delays. After the Henderson team departed, Winters lingered, waiting until we were alone in the conference room. That was well executed, he said finally. Both the technical design and the meeting strategy. Thank you, I replied, somewhat surprised by the compliment. For what it's worth, he added, I advised against this approach. Challenging superior engineering on technicalities rarely succeeds and often backfires. Yet you participated, I observed. He shrugged slightly. Theodore Northcott has been my boss for 27 years. Loyalty matters in our organization. Even when it means compromising professional integrity? Winters gathered his papers slowly. You should know that your father's position is more complicated than it appears. The board is divided on future direction. This Henderson situation, it's as much about internal politics as external competition. It was the second hint in 24 hours that Northcott Industries was experiencing internal turmoil. Interesting. Why are you telling me this? I asked, because good engineering deserves recognition, regardless of corporate politics. He handed me a business card. If Northcott Industries can't adapt to where the industry is clearly heading, some of us may need to consider alternatives. With that cryptic statement, he left, leaving me to wonder if I'd just witnessed the beginning of a potential exodus from my father's company. The rest of the day passed in a flurry of activity, debriefing the team on our successful defense, advancing other projects that had been temporarily sidelined, and preparing mentally for dinner with my parents. By the time 6:30 arrived, I felt simultaneously exhausted and energized, like a runner approaching the final stretch of a marathon. Your car is waiting, Rhea informed me, appearing at my office door. And before you ask, yes, I've prepared. A summary of today's Henderson resolution to review in the car, and yes, I've researched the restaurant thoroughly. Lucas has changed ownership since you last visited. The new chef trained in Barcelona and specializes in sustainable cuisine. A coincidence your mother couldn't possibly have planned. I smiled gratefully. What would I do without you? Forget to eat lunch and miss half your meetings, she replied promptly. Also, I took the liberty of selecting your attire for this evening. She handed me a garment bag containing not a business suit, but a deep green dress I'd purchased months ago and never worn, elegant but distinctly modern, nothing like the conservative styles my mother preferred. Bold choice, I observed. You're not returning as the prodigal daughter, Rhea reminded me. You're meeting as equals. Your appearance should reflect that reality. 20 minutes later, my driver pulled up to Luca's, an upscale restaurant in the historic district that had been a Northcott family favorite for decades. The maitre d' recognized me immediately, despite my 4-year absence. Ms. Northcott, welcome back, he said warmly. Your parents are already seated in the private dining room. As I followed him through the main restaurant, I noted the changes. Sustainable. Materials in the recent renovation, a menu highlighting local producers, wine offerings emphasizing biodynamic vineyards. The kind of evolution Northcott Industries was resisting. The private dining room door opened to reveal my parents seated at a round table by the window. My mother's perfect posture and my father's commanding presence were so familiar, it created a momentary dissonance, as if the past 4 years might have been a dream. As if I might still be the disappointing daughter seeking approval rather than the CEO coming from a position of strength. Olivia, my mother said, rising to greet me. She hesitated, clearly uncertain whether to embrace me or maintain formal distance. You look different. 4 years will do that, I replied, deciding to bypass the awkward physical greeting by simply taking my seat. The restaurant has changed too. For the better, I think. Yes, well, she said, settling back into her chair. Change seems to be the theme lately. My father had remained silent during this exchange, studying me with an expression I couldn't quite interpret. Finally, he spoke. I understand the Henderson representatives were satisfied with your technical explanation this morning. So he already knew about the meeting's outcome. His information network remained efficient, at least. They were more than satisfied, I corrected. They were impressed, as was Mr. Winters, I believe. A fleeting expression crossed my father's face, frustration mixed with something that might have been pride. Lucas has always appreciated technical excellence, he acknowledged, regardless of its source. An admirable quality, I noted. Evaluating work on its merits rather than preconceptions or allegiances. The server's arrival interrupted what was shaping up to be an immediately confrontational conversation. We ordered drinks and appetizers, falling into the familiar rhythm of Northcott family dining, precise preferences, detailed questions about preparation, the expectation of perfection. When we were alone again, my mother broke the strained silence. "Your brother asks about you, you know. He's tried calling several times." "I'm aware," I replied. "I've been rather busy running a company." "He feels terrible about how things unfolded," she continued. "We all do. The family dinner 4 years ago, it wasn't meant to be a complete rejection." I took a sip of water, considering my response carefully. What was it meant to be exactly? Because "don't come back until you've achieved something worth mentioning" seemed fairly unambiguous. My mother flinched slightly. Things were said in the heat of emotion. "You had just abandoned law school without a plan. We were concerned about your future." "No," I corrected. "You were concerned about how my choices reflected on the family image. There's a difference." Before she could respond, my father interjected. "We made mistakes, all of us. But we're here now to discuss moving forward, not relitigating the past." "Interesting perspective from someone who tried to undermine my company's contract just this morning," I observed. He had the grace to look slightly uncomfortable. "Business and family are separate considerations." "Are they?" "Because it seems like family expectations shaped your business strategy just as they shaped your parenting approach. Traditional methods, proven paths, resistance to innovation, even when evidence suggests adaptation is necessary for survival." The appetizers arrived, creating another brief respite in the increasingly tense conversation. I noticed my mother watching me with an expression I hadn't seen before, something close to curiosity rather than evaluation. "Your company," she said after the server departed again. "Horizon Innovations. Tell us about how you built it." The request seemed genuine, lacking the dismissive tone I would have expected. Still, I proceeded cautiously. "After leaving law school, I spent 6 months researching sustainable engineering approaches and identifying market gaps. I developed a business plan, secured seed funding from investors who shared my vision, and assembled a founding team with complementary expertise. Without using the Northcott name or connections," my father noted. "That was intentional," I confirmed. I needed to prove the concept could succeed on its merits, not family influence. "It was a riskier path," he observed. "But ultimately more valuable," I countered. "Each success was earned through innovation and execution, not legacy or relationship leverage. It created a foundation of authentic achievement." My mother was listening intently, her usual judgmental expression replaced by something more thoughtful. "And your team? How did you select them?" "Based on shared values and complementary skills. Technical expertise matters, of course, but so does commitment to our mission and ability to collaborate across disciplines." "Not Harvard degrees and family pedigrees?" she asked with the slightest hint of self-awareness. "Those weren't disqualifying factors," I said with a small smile, "just irrelevant to our hiring criteria." As we continued talking through the main course, I found myself sharing more details about Horizon's development than I had intended. The early challenges, the pivotal client who took a chance on our approach, the moment when our sustainable design for a tech campus won an international award, bringing mainstream attention to our methodology. My parents listened with surprising attention, asking questions that suggested genuine interest rather than skeptical evaluation. It was as if they were finally seeing my path as viable rather than misguided, my success as legitimate rather than accidental. When dessert arrived, my father set down his fork and looked at me directly. "I owe you an apology, Olivia. For many things, but particularly for this morning's tactics with Henderson." It was. an outdated approach that reflected poorly on Northcott Industries. The admission was so unexpected I momentarily struggled for a response. "Why did you do it?" I asked finally. "You must have known it would likely backfire." He sighed, suddenly looking older than I remembered. "Habit, competitive instinct, and perhaps a stubborn inability to accept that the industry has evolved beyond the methods that built our company." "The board is pressuring you to modernize," I guessed, remembering Eliza's hint. He nodded. "3 of our largest clients have shifted significant portions of their business to firms with stronger sustainability credentials. Our stock has underperformed the sector for 6 consecutive quarters, and your success with Horizon has become a reference point for what Northcott Industries is failing to capture." My father's admission hung in the air between us, more revealing than any words he'd spoken to me in years. Theodore Northcott, the man who built an engineering empire on unwavering confidence, was acknowledging vulnerability. "So this dinner," I said carefully, "is about more than family reconciliation." "Yes and no," my mother interjected, surprising me. "The company situation accelerated our timeline, but we've been discussing reaching out to you for months. Your absence has been more significant than we anticipated." I studied her face, searching for the calculated manipulation I'd learned to expect. Instead, I found something rare. Genuine regret shadowing her perfectly composed features. "We've watched your success from afar," she continued. "Your father had quarterly reports prepared on Horizon's development." This revelation startled me. "You've been monitoring my company?" "Not in a competitive sense," my father clarified quickly. "I wanted to understand what you were building, how you were approaching the market differently. It was—" He hesitated, searching for words that didn't come naturally to him. A way to stay connected when direct communication seemed impossible. The thought of my parents tracking my professional journey through anonymous reports was both unsettling and strangely touching, a distorted expression of care filtered through their corporate mindset. "At first, I expected you to fail," he admitted bluntly. "I believed your approach was too idealistic, too focused on sustainability rather than proven engineering methods." "And then?" I prompted when he paused. "And then you started winning. Contracts we couldn't even compete for. Clients began asking why Northcott Industries didn't offer the integrated sustainability solutions your team had developed. The Henderson project," he shook his head slightly, "we weren't even shortlisted because our sustainability credentials were deemed insufficient." I absorbed this information silently. The vindication I might have expected to feel was tempered by the genuine struggle I saw in my father's expression. This wasn't just about business competition. It was about a lifetime of certainty being challenged. "The industry is evolving," I said finally. "Adaptation isn't just about adding green initiatives to traditional methods. It requires rethinking fundamental approaches to engineering and development." "That much is clear," he acknowledged. "Which brings us to the purpose of this dinner, beyond long overdue family reconciliation." Here it was, the business proposition hidden within the personal outreach. I steeled myself for whatever negotiation tactic he was about to deploy. "Northcott Industries needs to change," he stated simply. "The board has made it clear that our current trajectory is unsustainable. They've authorized me to pursue strategic partnerships that could accelerate our transition to more modern methodologies." "And you want Horizon to be that partner," I concluded, the pieces falling into place. "It would be a logical alignment," he suggested. "Our established client base and technical infrastructure combined with your innovative approaches and sustainability expertise." The private dining room door opened to reveal my parents seated at a round table by the window. My mother's perfect posture and my father's commanding presence were so familiar it created a momentary dissonance, as if the past 4 years might have been a dream. as if I might still be the disappointing daughter seeking approval rather than the CEO coming from a position of strength. "Olivia," my mother said, rising to greet me. She hesitated, clearly uncertain whether to embrace me or maintain formal distance. "You look different." "4 years will do that," I replied, deciding to bypass the awkward physical greeting by simply taking my seat. "The restaurant has changed too. For the better, I think." "Yes, well," she said, settling back into her chair. "Change seems to be the theme lately." My father had remained silent during this exchange, studying me with an expression I couldn't quite interpret. Finally, he spoke. "I understand the Henderson representatives were satisfied with your technical explanation this morning." So he already knew about the meeting's outcome. His information network remained efficient at least. "They were more than satisfied," I corrected. "They were impressed. As was Mr. Winters, I believe." A fleeting expression crossed my father's face, frustration mixed with something that might have been pride. "Lucas has always appreciated technical excellence," he acknowledged, regardless of its source. "An admirable quality," I noted. "Evaluating work on its merits rather than preconceptions or allegiances." The server's arrival interrupted what was shaping up to be an immediately confrontational conversation. We ordered drinks and appetizers, falling into the familiar rhythm of Northcott family dining. Precise preferences, detailed questions about preparation, the expectation of perfection. When we were alone again, my mother broke the strained silence. "Your brother asks about you, you know. He's tried calling several times." "I'm aware," I replied. "I've been rather busy running a company." "He feels terrible about how things unfolded," she continued. "We all do. The family dinner 4 years ago, it wasn't meant to be a complete rejection." I took a sip of water, considering my response carefully. What was it meant to be, exactly? Because "don't come back until you've achieved something worth mentioning" seemed fairly unambiguous. My mother flinched slightly. Things were said in the heat of emotion. "You had just abandoned law school without a plan. We were concerned about your future." "No," I corrected. "You were concerned about how my choices reflected on the family image. There's a difference." Before she could respond, my father interjected. "We made mistakes, all of us. But we're here now to discuss moving forward, not relitigating the past." Interesting perspective from someone who tried to undermine my company's contract just this morning, I observed. He had the grace to look slightly uncomfortable. Business and family are separate considerations. Are they? Because it seems like family expectations shaped your business strategy just as they shaped your parenting approach. Traditional methods, proven paths, resistance to innovation, even when evidence suggests adaptation is necessary for survival. The appetizers arrived, creating another brief respite in the increasingly tense conversation. I noticed my mother, watching me with an expression I hadn't seen before, something close to curiosity rather than evaluation. "Your company," she said after the server departed again, "Horizon Innovations. Tell us about how you built it." The request seemed genuine, lacking the dismissive tone I would have expected. Still, I proceeded cautiously. After leaving law school, I spent 6 months researching sustainable engineering approaches and identifying market gaps. I developed a business plan, secured seed funding from investors who shared my vision, and assembled a founding team with complementary expertise. Without using the Northcott name or connections, my father noted. That was intentional. Confirmed. I needed to prove the concept could succeed on its merits, not family influence. It was a riskier path, he observed. But ultimately more valuable, I countered. Each success was earned through innovation and execution, not legacy or relationship leverage. It created a foundation of authentic achievement. My mother was listening intently, her usual judgmental expression replaced by something more thoughtful. And your team? How did you select them? Based on shared values and complementary skills. Technical expertise matters, of course, but so does commitment to our mission and ability to collaborate across disciplines. Not Harvard degrees and family pedigrees? She asked with the slightest hint of self-awareness. Those weren't disqualifying factors, I said with a small smile, just irrelevant to our hiring criteria. As we continued talking through the main course, I found myself sharing more details about Horizon's development than I had intended. The early challenges, the pivotal client who took a chance on our approach, the moment when our sustainable design for a tech campus won an international award, bringing mainstream attention to our methodology. My parents listened with surprising attention, asking questions that suggested genuine interest rather than skeptical evaluation. It was as if they were finally seeing my path as viable rather than misguided, my success as legitimate rather than accidental. When dessert arrived, my father set down his fork and looked at me directly. I owe you an apology, Olivia, for many things, but particularly for this morning's tactics with Henderson. It was an outdated approach that reflected poorly on Northcott Industries. The admission was so unexpected, I momentarily struggled for a response. Why did you do it? I asked finally. You must have known it would likely backfire. He sighed, suddenly looking older than I remembered. Habit, competitive instinct, and perhaps a stubborn inability to accept that the industry has evolved beyond the methods that built our company. The board is pressuring you to modernize, I guessed, remembering Eliza's hint. He nodded. 3 of our largest clients have shifted significant portions of their business to firms with stronger sustainability credentials. Our stock has underperformed the sector for 6 consecutive quarters, and your success with Horizon has become a reference point for what Northcott Industries is failing to capture. My father's admission hung in the air between us, more revealing than any words he'd spoken to me in years. Theodore Northcott, the man who built an engineering empire, on unwavering confidence, was acknowledging vulnerability. So this dinner, I said carefully, is about more than family reconciliation. Yes and no, my mother interjected, surprising me. The company situation accelerated our timeline, but we've been discussing reaching out to you for months. Your absence has been more significant than we anticipated. I studied her face, searching for the calculated manipulation I'd learned to expect. Instead, I found something rare, genuine regret shadowing her perfectly composed features. We've watched your success from afar, she continued. Your father had quarterly reports prepared on Horizon's development. This revelation startled me. You've been monitoring my company? Not in a competitive sense, my father clarified quickly. I wanted to understand what you were building, how you were approaching the market differently. It was. He hesitated, searching for words that didn't come naturally to him. A way to stay connected when direct communication seemed impossible. The thought of my parents tracking my professional journey through anonymous reports was both unsettling and strangely touching, a distorted expression of care filtered through their corporate mindset. At first, I expected you to fail, he admitted bluntly. I believed your approach was too idealistic, too focused on sustainability, rather than proven engineering methods. And then, I prompted when he paused. And then you started winning contracts we couldn't even compete for. Clients began asking why Northcott Industries didn't offer the integrated sustainability solutions your team had developed. The Henderson project, he shook his head slightly. We weren't even shortlisted because our sustainability credentials were deemed insufficient. I absorbed this information silently. The vindication I might have expected to feel was tempered by the genuine struggle I saw in my father's expression. This wasn't just about business competition, it was about a lifetime of certainty being challenged. The industry is evolving, I said finally. Adaptation isn't just about adding green initiatives to traditional methods. It requires rethinking fundamental approaches to engineering and development. That much is clear, he acknowledged. Which brings us to the purpose of this dinner, beyond long overdue family reconciliation. Here it was, the business proposition hidden within the personal outreach. I steeled myself for whatever negotiation tactic he was about to deploy. Northcott Industries needs to change, he stated simply. The board has made it clear that our current trajectory is unsustainable. They've authorized me to pursue strategic partnerships that could accelerate our transition to more modern methodologies. And you want Horizon to be that partner, I concluded, the pieces falling into place. It would be a logical alignment, he suggested. Our established client base and technical infrastructure combined with your innovative approaches and sustainability expertise. My mother watched this exchange with uncharacteristic quietness, her eyes moving between us as if witnessing a tennis match with historic implications. A partnership, I repeated, turning the concept over in my mind. Not an acquisition or absorption. A true collaboration, he clarified. Structured, however, makes most sense for both organizations. I leaned back in my chair, studying the man who had dismissed my vision 4 years ago, now essentially acknowledging its superior market position. Why Horizon? I asked, though I suspected I knew the answer. There are established sustainability engineering firms you could approach, firms without our complicated personal history. My father exchanged a glance with my mother before responding. 3 reasons. First, Horizon's specific approach to integration, combining technical excellence with community engagement and environmental responsibility, is precisely what our clients are demanding. Second, your company's culture and values represent the direction the board believes is necessary for our future viability. He paused, seeming to gather himself for the 3rd reason. My mother reached over and placed her hand on his, a rare public display of support. And 3rd, he continued, his voice less certain than I'd ever heard it, because I've spent 30 years building something I believed would be a meaningful legacy. Watching it become increasingly irrelevant has been difficult. But seeing what you've created, something that matters not just financially but in terms of actual impact, has made me rethink what legacy truly means. The sincerity in his voice was unmistakable. This wasn't a tactical business maneuver. It was something more fundamental, a father recognizing that his daughter had built something more meaningful than he had. I need time to consider this, I said finally. There are significant questions about structure, autonomy, cultural integration. Of course, he agreed quickly. We're not expecting an immediate answer. The board has authorized me to open exploratory discussions. Nothing more at this stage. And if those discussions don't lead to partnership? I asked. What's Northcott Industries' alternative strategy? A shadow crossed his face. Limited options, downsizing to focus on core traditional services, potentially selling divisions that can't be modernized quickly enough, a significantly reduced market presence. The implications were clear. Jobs lost, careers disrupted, a family legacy diminished to a fraction of its former significance. I'll review your proposal when you send it, I said, neither committing nor rejecting outright. But any discussion would need to begin with absolute transparency about Northcott Industries' current situation, financial, cultural, and technical. He nodded, accepting my terms without hesitation. Complete transparency. You'll have whatever information you need to make an informed assessment. As the dinner concluded and we prepared to depart, my mother surprised me by asking, "Would you show us your offices sometime? I'd like to see what you've built." The request seemed genuinely motivated by curiosity rather than evaluation, another unexpected shift in our dynamic. I could arrange a tour next week, I offered cautiously. We'd appreciate that, she said, then added with uncharacteristic hesitation. And perhaps, regardless of the business considerations, we could establish some form of regular family contact? Your absence has been significant. 4 years ago, I would have desperately wanted to hear these words. Now I received them with measured consideration rather than emotional need. One step at a time, I suggested. Let's see how the company discussions progress before complicating matters with further personal entanglement. Outside the restaurant, as we prepared to go our separate ways, my father paused before getting into his car. Whatever happens with the companies, I want you to know that what you've built is remarkable, Olivia. Not because it proves us wrong, but because it proves what's possible when someone has the courage to follow their convictions. It was perhaps the most genuine compliment he had ever offered me, an acknowledgement not filtered through family, expectations, or business metrics, but a recognition of authentic achievement. As my car pulled away, I felt a complex mixture of emotions, vindication tempered by unexpected empathy, the satisfaction of recognition balanced against the realization that my parents' approval no longer defined my sense of worth. My phone buzzed with a message from Ria. How was the battlefield? Any casualties to report? I smiled at her characteristic directness. Unexpected outcome. They've proposed a strategic partnership between Horizon and Northcott Industries. Apparently, we're the future they failed to anticipate. Her response came quickly. Plot twist. Are we considering it? We're considering it, I replied. But first, I need the team's perspective. Schedule a leadership breakfast for Monday? This affects everyone, not just me. The next morning, I arrived at Horizon earlier than usual, needing time to process the previous evening's revelations before sharing them with my team. The building was quiet, most employees not due for another hour. I walked through the open workspace, appreciating the thoughtful design we'd created together. A.E. physical manifestation of our values and vision. My office walls held framed milestones of our journey. Our first major contract, the Sustainability Innovation Award, newspaper features highlighting our community integration projects. Each represented a moment when we'd proven that engineering could prioritize environmental and social impact alongside technical excellence and financial success. The contrast with my father's approach couldn't have been clearer. His office walls displayed achievements of a different nature, industry awards celebrating traditional metrics, photographs with political and business leaders, recognition for structures that dominated landscapes rather than integrating with them. Could two such different organizational cultures meaningfully collaborate? Or would partnership inevitably mean compromise, a dilution of the very values that made Horizon successful? You're brooding again, observed Elena, appearing at my office door with 2 coffee cups. Thought you might need this. Ria mentioned the partnership bombshell. I accepted the coffee gratefully. Contemplating, not brooding. There's a difference. Semantics, she countered, settling into the chair across from my desk. Want to talk through it? Elena had been with me since the beginning, one of the original 6 employees who'd believed in our vision when it was just a concept in a warehouse. Her perspective mattered. My father wants to create a strategic partnership between Northcott Industries and Horizon, I explained. The board is pushing for modernization, and they see us as their fastest route to relevance in the changing market. And you're torn, she concluded, studying my expression. Between vindication and concern, that partnership could compromise what we've built. Something like that, I admitted. Intellectually, there are potential advantages. There are established client relationships, technical resources, market position. But culturally, I trailed off, uncertain how to articulate my concerns. You're worried we'd become more like them than they'd become like us, Elena finished the thought. Exactly. Integration typically favors the larger, more established entity. And Northcott's traditional approach is deeply embedded in their organizational DNA, it's my father's legacy. Elena considered this thoughtfully. Maybe legacy is the wrong framework, she suggested. What if instead of seeing this as preserving or compromising either company's existing identity, we viewed it as an opportunity to create something genuinely new? What do you mean? The industry needs transformation, not just incremental improvement, but fundamental reimagining of how engineering serves communities and environments. Neither Horizon nor Northcott alone represents the complete solution. But together, combining their technical depth with our innovative approach, that could be truly revolutionary. Her perspective shifted something in my thinking. I'd been viewing the potential partnership through the lens of competition. Which company's culture would dominate? Which legacy would prevail? But what if the point wasn't to determine a winner, but to transcend the limitations of both approaches? That's a compelling reframing, I acknowledged. Plus, Elena added with a slight smile, there's something poetically appropriate about the daughter teaching the father how to build for the future, rather than just preserving the past. By the time the leadership team gathered for Monday's breakfast meeting, I'd had 2 days to contemplate the partnership possibility from multiple angles. As my core team, Elena, Javier, Mackenzie, Damon, and Lena, settled around the conference table with coffee and pastries, I laid out the situation without filtering or predetermining the direction. Northcott Industries has proposed a strategic partnership, I explained. Their board is pushing for modernization, and they see Horizon's approach as their potential salvation in a changing market. Your father's company wants our help? Mackenzie clarified, clearly enjoying the irony. The same company that tried to undermine our Henderson contract last week? The same, I confirmed, though to be fair, they've since apologized for that tactical error and invited complete transparency going forward. Forgive me for being cynical, Javier interjected, but could this be another tactic? Get close enough to understand our methodology, then replicate it without actually partnering? It was a legitimate concern, one I'd considered myself. Possible, but unlikely given their current market position. They don't have time for that approach. Their stock is down, clients are shifting to competitors with stronger sustainability credentials, and the board is demanding immediate action. So they're desperate, Lena observed, which means we have significant leverage in any negotiation. Essentially, yes, but I didn't call this meeting to discuss negotiating positions. I want your honest assessment of whether a partnership makes sense for Horizon, for our mission, our people, and our values. What followed was exactly the kind of thoughtful, multidimensional discussion that had made Horizon successful. Each leader brought their unique perspective. Mackenzie analyzed the financial implications, identifying potential synergies and risks. Their established client base could accelerate our growth significantly, but integration costs would be substantial. Cultural misalignment often torpedoes mergers that look good on paper. Javier raised concerns about community impact. Northcott has a mixed reputation in some neighborhoods where their projects displaced residents without adequate consideration. How would we reconcile that history with our commitment to community integration? Damon saw technical opportunities. Their engineering infrastructure is robust. Combined with our innovative approaches, we could develop solutions neither company could create independently. Lena focused on team dynamics. Our people chose Horizon specifically because we're different. How would they feel about association with a traditional firm many deliberately avoided in their career choices? Elena, who'd already shared her thoughts about creating something new, added, whatever we decide, it should advance the larger mission of transforming how engineering serves people and planet, not just benefit either company's bottom line. As the discussion continued, I found myself increasingly convinced that the right approach wasn't a simple yes or no, but a carefully structured exploration of what partnership might mean in practice. Here's what I propose, I said finally. We agree to preliminary discussions with complete transparency on both sides. We developed specific criteria for what successful partnership would require: preservation of Horizon's culture and values, meaningful integration rather than absorption, and advancement of our core mission. And if those criteria can't be met? Mackenzie asked. Then we walk away, knowing we gave it fair consideration, I replied. Our success doesn't depend on this partnership. We're exploring it as a potential acceleration of our mission, not a necessary lifeline. The team agreed to this approach, each volunteering to develop criteria specific to their domains of expertise. As they filed out to start their workday, Rhea entered with a message. Your father called. The board has scheduled a special session tomorrow to discuss the potential partnership. He's asking if you'd be willing to present Horizon's perspective directly to them. This was unexpected. An invitation to address the very board that had likely dismissed my approach as impractical just months ago. Interesting tactical choice, I mused, bringing me into their space rather than coming to ours. Or maybe it's simpler than that, Rhea suggested. Maybe he wants them to see firsthand what they've been missing, to hear directly from the person whose vision they failed to recognize. The possibility resonated. This wasn't just about business strategy. It was about changing mindsets, demonstrating a different approach to success that prioritized impact alongside profit. Tell him I'll be there, I decided. But I'll need their complete financial and operational data in advance. No presentation without full context. The data arrived within hours. Detailed reports on Northcott Industries' financial position, client relationships, project portfolio, and organizational structure. The transparency was unprecedented, revealing vulnerabilities my father would never typically disclose to anyone outside the company, let alone a potential business partner. Most revealing were the client satisfaction surveys showing a clear pattern: growing dissatisfaction with Northcott's limited sustainability offerings and community engagement approaches. The very elements that defined Horizon's success were precisely what Northcott's clients were increasingly demanding. I spent the evening preparing my presentation, not as a pitch for partnership, but as an honest assessment of what meaningful collaboration would require. This wasn't about winning or dominating. It was about potentially creating something that could transform an industry. The next morning, I entered Northcott Industries headquarters for the first time in 4 years. The imposing stone building hadn't changed, still projecting stability, tradition, and uncompromising permanence. Inside, however, the atmosphere felt different, a subtle tension underlying the composed professionalism, like an organism sensing a necessary but uncomfortable adaptation approaching. My father met me in the lobby, his expression a mixture of professional composure and personal uncertainty. The board is assembled. Thank you for agreeing to this on short notice. Transparency deserves reciprocity, I replied, referencing the comprehensive data he'd shared. As we rode the elevator to the top-floor boardroom, he added, They've reviewed your company's portfolio and financials. They're impressed, but skeptical about cultural integration. That's where your perspective will be most valuable. The boardroom was exactly as I remembered: dark wood paneling, leather chairs, oil paintings of significant projects lining the walls. Around the massive table sat 12 board members, mostly men in their 50s and 60s, with 3 women who seemed to be the more recent additions. All regarded me with expressions ranging from curiosity to barely concealed skepticism. Ms. Northcott, began the chair, Abigail Richardson, one of the few board members who had joined after my departure. Thank you for joining us. Your father has proposed a strategic partnership between our companies that represents a significant departure from Northcott Industries' traditional approach. We'd appreciate your perspective on how such an arrangement might function in practice. I noted her careful language, Ms. Northcott rather than Theodore's daughter, acknowledging me as a separate business entity rather than a family extension. Thank you for the invitation, I replied, activating my presentation. I've reviewed the data shared yesterday and prepared an analysis of what meaningful partnership might require, as well as the potential benefits and challenges involved. For the next 30 minutes, I outlined Horizon's philosophy and methodology, contrasting it with Northcott's traditional approach, without judgment or criticism, simply as different models with different strengths. I presented case studies of our projects, emphasizing the integration of technical excellence, environmental sustainability, and community engagement as inseparable elements rather than sequential considerations. The fundamental difference, I explained, isn't just in technical solutions, but in process design. Horizon approaches each project as an ecosystem rather than a structure. This requires different team compositions, different client engagement models, and different success metrics. I could see some board members shifting uncomfortably, particularly those who had been with the company longest. This wasn't just about adding sustainability features to existing methods. It was about reimagining the entire engineering approach. Which brings us to the question of partnership, I continued. Integration between our organizations would require not just technical alignment, but cultural transformation. Horizon's team members chose our company specifically because of our values and methods. Preserving those elements would be non-negotiable in any potential collaboration. My father watched from the side of the room, his expression unreadable, but his attention complete. I wondered what he was thinking, whether he saw this presentation as a challenge to his legacy or an opportunity to evolve it. That said, I added, there are compelling reasons to consider collaboration. Northcott Industries has developed technical expertise, client relationships, and market presence that would typically take Horizon years to build independently. Combined with our innovative methodology, we could potentially accelerate industry transformation significantly. I concluded with a proposed framework for exploring partnership, a staged process with clear milestones and evaluation criteria, emphasis on cultural integration alongside business metrics, and explicit commitment to advancing sustainability and community engagement as core values rather than supplemental considerations. When I finished, the room was silent for several moments. Then Richardson spoke. This is clearly not a traditional merger or acquisition approach. You're proposing something more transformative. Yes, I confirmed, because traditional corporate integration typically suboptimal cultural preservation, especially when the organizations begin with fundamentally different values. If this partnership is to succeed, it needs to create something genuinely new, not simply absorb one company into another. And if we determine that such transformation isn't feasible, asked an older board member, if the cultural gap proves too wide, then we would both proceed independently, I replied simply. Horizon's growth trajectory is strong. We're exploring this possibility because of its potential transformative impact, not because we need it to survive. The contrast with Northcott's position was clear without being stated explicitly. Their need was greater than ours, a reality reflected in the data they had shared. The discussion that followed was surprisingly substantive, focused on practical questions about integration methodology, client messaging, team composition, and market positioning. The board members engaged thoughtfully, their initial skepticism giving way to genuine consideration of how such a partnership might function. Throughout, my father remained largely silent, allowing the board to form their own impressions without his influence. Only near the end did Richardson turn to him directly. Theodore, you've built this company on certain principles for 3 decades. This partnership would represent a significant evolution of that legacy. Are you comfortable with that direction? All eyes turned to him, the founder and architect of Northcott Industries' traditional approach, now being asked to publicly endorse its transformation. He stood, moving to stand beside me rather than remaining separated. When I founded this company, my vision was to build structures that would last, that would stand as testaments to solid engineering principles. That vision served us well, for many years. He paused, glancing at me before continuing. But what Olivia has demonstrated through Horizon Innovations is that longevity now requires different foundations, ones that consider environmental impact, community integration, and sustainability as core elements rather than afterthoughts. Her company isn't succeeding despite prioritizing these elements, it's succeeding because of them. The room was completely silent, everyone recognizing the significance of this acknowledgement. The choice before us, he continued, isn't whether to preserve Northcott Industries' traditional approach or adopt Horizon's innovative one. It's whether we want to participate in defining the future of engineering or be left behind by it. I believe this partnership represents our best opportunity to ensure that the company's impact continues for another 30 years, even if it looks different than I originally envisioned. As the meeting concluded and the board moved to executive session to discuss next steps, my father and I found ourselves alone in the hallway, the founder of Northcott Industries and the creator of Horizon Innovations, father and daughter, past and future, standing at the threshold of potential transformation. That can't have been easy, I acknowledged, publicly advocating for change to the approach you built your career on. Easier than continuing to pretend the industry isn't evolving, he replied, or that my daughter hasn't built something remarkable that deserves recognition. The personal and professional acknowledgments intertwined, impossible to separate after so many years of blurred boundaries between family expectations and business values. Whatever the board decides, he added, I want you to know I'm proud of what you've created. Not because it vindicates my legacy or extends the family name, but because it matters. Because you've built something that improves lives in ways I never fully considered. As we waited for the board's initial response, I reflected on the journey that had brought us to this moment. From rejection to reconciliation, from competing visions to potential collaboration. Whatever happened next, the most important transformation had already occurred. Not in business structures or market positions, but in the recognition that true success isn't measured by adherence to tradition, but by the courage to evolve when evolution serves a greater purpose. The door opened, and Richardson emerged with the board's preliminary decision. The future of both companies, and perhaps the industry itself, was about to take shape, forged from the unexpected alchemy of a daughter's defiance and a father's belated recognition that legacy means nothing if it cannot adapt to changing truths. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.